I want to talk about how I make a living as a professional poet. And no, this is not my house, but I just thought that I should start the video there for some reason. And of course, right on cue, the weed eaters come in. So I have been a professional poet now for 3.5 years. I started out as a musician and I transitioned to being a professional poet. And I want to just lay it out there that anybody can do this. Anybody can be a poet. It's really not that hard. You kind of just call yourself a poet, get fancy with your words, all slick like, and then you just make a word salad. And that's pretty much it. I define poetry as using words to go beyond words, and pretty much anybody does that. So in this video, I just want to outline how I actually do it, how I actually make those dollars as a poet, and how you could do the same thing. So I make money in a variety of ways. One of them is YouTube. In a way, this video is like a poem. It's just a really long poem. But I make most of my money on the streets writing poems for other people. At markets, on the busy street areas, in cities. That's where I make a living, and you can do the same thing. I use a typewriter. I make a sign that says pick a topic, get a poem. People come up to me because they're attracted to the typewriter. I say, what would you like a poem about? And they think about it for a second, and then they say, oh, my sister, or whatever. And then I'll be like, tell me about your sister, and then I write the poem based off some of the things they give me. She has blonde hair, she's goofy, she's funny, and then I just riff on that. And I'll just make up a poem like, blonde, strawberry, beautiful woman, luscious room of decadent wonder, and I just really make it up. It's all off the cuff, and people love it. They soak it up, and you let people pay whatever they want. It's all donation based, and you get some fancy paper, maybe give them a color choice of the paper. All of that helps make it look visually appealing, and then that's it. That's a high value item right there. Some people pay around $30 for that, and it's worth it because it continues to accrue value over time. People will love it. They put it on their fridge, they frame it, and there you go. You know, you're on your way to making a living as a poet if you can stay busy. People are constantly getting poems. Before you know it, you made a few $100. So that's the best way, because that literally, you don't need a website. You don't need to make gigs. You know, you get your start that way. Most poets I know got their start that way. Then you can get gigs as a poet for weddings, bar mitzvahs, corporate events, all kinds of events. You get gigs, and people will hire you to come write poems at their event. I have a friend, he just charged $1,200 an hour for 2 hours for a Valentine's Day gig. That's big money, you know? And so that's another way. Another way is to sell your own books. You get some poems under your belt, you edit them during the week, you publish a book. Now you're selling books at your table where you're selling poems. So that's another way. You could make a class on how to write poems better and workshop it. Get people to come in. Charge people money for that. There's all kinds of ways you can make money as a poet. Try to find alliances with people, event planners, people who work at universities, people who could be helpful for you. They have opportunities for you. Everyone is an opportunity. When you're writing poems for other people, Make it all about them. That's what gives it value. And make it concrete. If they tell you details, put those in the poem. You know? It's not just a girl, it's a blonde-head, blue-eyed girl, for instance. So those are the ways, you know, you got to be writing good poems. You got to be out there in the world. That's how you really get good as a poet. And that's the best way to make a living as a poet. It's hard, it's pretty difficult to be a poet from behind the scenes where you're sitting at home writing all day. Yeah, you can do Insta poetry, but I don't like that. It's not real to me. It's just bite-sized chunks. I'm not into it. I like longer poems personally. And the thing about poetry is all of your words have a great level of power. So you can use words to attract what you want to into your life. Sometimes I sit at the typewriter and just type "big money to me now." And it works. You would be surprised. The law of attraction works. Write poems about creating abundance and wealth. Those are my favorite poems sometimes to write, because you'll really hit the nail on the head with abundance, and then people just pay you tons of money for that poem every time, I swear. My record for one poem, $250. So most people don't think about that you just go out into the world and write poems, but that's the best way. That's the best way to make a living as a poet. You got to get out there. And you know what? That's where all the inspiration is too. The birds chirping in the trees. The surfboards that people use as mailboxes. Everything is inspiration. And what's cool is that all the travel I do pays for itself. If I want to keep working, I'll go from my home, which is in a cold place. It's seasonal. I can only work as a poet there about half the year because it's too cold for half the year. And I'll come to a place like Hawaii. Everything pays for itself as long as I work. And so you can live your dream as a poet, but you just gotta flip it on its head. You gotta think about all the best ways to serve others through your poetry. And pretty soon, you keep doing it, you're gonna get really good at writing poems, and then people will start to notice your art. You keep showing up and serving people, people are gonna notice. You gotta stay on your grind as a poet. You gotta stay vigilant. You gotta be writing every day. You gotta be writing multiple times a day. Keeping a notepad around you all the time with a pen. Keeping an eye out into the world, ready to see the magic that's there at all times. So that's how I make a living as a poet. I'm observant. I'm open to changing the lens of perception. Because as you open up other people's perceptions, they realize the great value of your art, of your poetry. Because without poetry, where would we be? We would be stuck in the same rigid ideas. Poetry is the opposite of a government parking lot. Poetry is undefined, out of bounds. Poetry opens minds. It is unrefined. It is on your own time that you discover this, that you allow yourself to taste the knowing of the unknown. Anyway, I get a little ethereal with that, but you're starting to get the point, which is, if you want to make a living as a poet, then you simply speak it into existence. You go out and you show up and you keep working, and you're like a sculptor. You keep chiseling, you're chiseling at yourself, because every poem that you get to write for someone else is an opportunity to work on yourself. It's medicine for you. So that's why it's important just to get out there and write. That's the number one thing. But if you can get a little bit better, how do I get better? How do I look up videos so I can write better poems? The number one thing I think to give you as a writing tip, use concrete details to anchor your poem. If you get too whimsical, too ethereal, without putting real tactile elements of a half full cup of lukewarm coffee, such as intimate descriptions of objects, and the more relatable the object, the better, and you scatter those throughout the poem. Why were you tired today? I forgot to drink my coffee. It became lukewarm. All of the details are what is grounding your poem. So get good, get better at writing poems. It'll be much easier to make a living at writing poems. Release a book. That's a challenge. Learn how to publish. Use self-publishing software. It's actually not that hard. I figured it out. If I can figure it out, you can figure it out. Spoiler alert. So anyway, I'll hop off here, but you can do it. You can make a living as a poet. I transitioned from being a pro musician to a poet because I realized people wanted to pay for physical products. We're tactile beings. We want real, authentic, relatable poems that we can hold in our hands. And that is what creates value. You're sitting there with your typewriter and you're literally just printing money. So that's how you make a living as a poet.